Well, good morning, Jan Recker.
Hi, Nick. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. So today we have a couple of guests with us here, and it's Mengxiang Li and Sissy Li. And Mengxiang's at the Hong Kong Baptist University, and then Sissy is at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Well, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Jay.
The reason we asked you to join us is we have this forthcoming special issue on managing artificial intelligence in MIS Quarterly, and you have this cool paper on the role of CIOs and the board makeup on AI orientation. So that's why we asked you to come join us. So, so we're going to talk a little bit about this paper. And the basic point of the paper is that you were looking at upper echelon theory, and you looked at how board makeup influences organizations in their AI orientation. Now, we liked this paper from the beginning, but you did a lot, right? You collected a ton of data in China. And then part of the way you added Jason Thatcher along. Like, he wasn't there for the original submission, but then you added him. So I don't know, tell us a little bit about that story. You have a ton of data. There are some really cool things about this paper that I want to discuss, but how did it come about? Like, how did you decide to submit this paper, and how did you decide to study this in the first place?
So this paper actually was not really looked at it right now when we first submitted that. You must know it. So the original idea in our mind is more like what happens for forums when we want to use AI. People are talking about AI all the time, right? Mm-hmm. And there's so many firms that are interested. But here for us, we're not really interested in those, very big companies who really have the specific labs to develop AI. We are more focused on how firm can really use AI and the problems they may encounter in the process and what they can do to really benefit from this leverage of AI. So that's kind of like the original thoughts. So the original version is more like the knowledge, the networks, the patents, innovation is all about how firms can benefit. And then later we just realize, it's under the help from the whole review team and the editorial board. It's kind of like AI we need to be more specific. We cannot really be that general to just make AI the same as all the other technologies. So that's why we switched to the upper echelon theory, and then us invite Jason to join us, because he is kind of like more towards on the innovation upper echelon in the IS field. So I guess that's kind of like something from my perspective.
Yeah.
So, Sissy, I looked up your profile just before, and I know you've done a lot of research on networks and innovation. You just mentioned that's where you started. So where you ended up is not really what you've done before up to this point. So how was that change in direction for you, right? It sounds like you took quite a turn in direction for this paper to come out, and it's quite unlike the other papers that I saw you publish in AMJ and so forth.
Yeah, it's not the same as the other paper I published, but it's not actually a turn for me, because when I was trained in Texas A&M in the management department, and all my supervisors and faculty members there are a group of corporate governance researchers. So I was trained to learn the upper echelon theory and all the governance related. It's kind of like, I don't know why, but all my governance work is still like the working papers. So they are still on the table, but still it's not really a turn for me.
Yeah, but the original submission really did have a lot of network stuff. It had network variables in it, and that just was out the window, right? I guess there's still a little bit of, board, but you didn't use any of the network variables, right? There's like, I don't know what you call it, board interlocks or something when they're at it.
Yeah, interlocks is a network variable. Yeah.
So and then it's about it. That's the only thing that kept the network stuff as it was revised. I mean, it's become a pretty straight econometrics paper in the method section, but it's nice in that there's a lot of theorizing, right? A lot of econometrics papers have kind of minimal theorizing, and this gets into upper echelons theory a bit. I don't know. So how did you add Jason of all people? Like, did you know him before, or did you just call him up and be like, hey, we need help? Like, how did that conversation happen? I don't think we recommended that you add someone, did we, in the review process?
Yeah, so I think I can take these questions because it was a very fantastic collaboration with CCs. So we have the talk before, I think 1 year ago when before we submit the first version of the papers. So we talk about the interlock and talk about the network as well as the role of the CIO. So Nick, if you remember for the first submissions that we used the CIO as the moderator rather than the independent variables. And later on, right. So we have our first submissions, and then we thought that maybe we need to find the senior scholars to help us to read this paper and provide some of the comments. And fortunately, at that time, Jason visited our university. So I talked with Jason.
So he was in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And he was AIS president at the time, right?
No, not anymore, I don't think.
Not anymore? Okay. So he's just hanging out in Hong Kong visiting people, and he met. Now, wait, did we suggest to get a senior person, or did you just decide we need a more senior person to help us? Or I'm curious about that thought process. What happened? Like, how did...
If I remember correctly, at the times the Jasons visited our university and a school for several months, and during that process, we had some of the conversation sessions. So Jason provides us the opportunities to discuss with him. So that times I think I think it's the good opportunities. I must discuss something with him. So this is the working paper at that time. So I met him and discussed the papers. And of course, we discussed other papers as well, including some other papers like the transmission of the fake news, something like that. But this paper was one of them.
Well, that's how it goes sometimes, right? It seems like there was just a slice of luck in that you had an opportunity to get someone else on board that provided yet another perspective. Can I tell you guys what I found the most interesting thing about the paper?
Sure.
So to me, this is not really upper echelon theory. So that, that's just a framing that is very useful. What I really liked is that concept of AI orientation, in particularly how you operationalized it. Now that was innovative. Yeah. So these orientation measures, and there's orientation indices and orientation measurement instruments for all sorts of things. And there always have been, and there always will be. And I find them very bland, very boring. But you had a very innovative idea of measuring AI orientation, and not like through a 7-point Likert scale where you go and ask a few people, but rather that you actually basically, I'm exaggerating here, but using AI to measure AI orientation. That's sort of pushing it a little bit. But can we talk about this? How did you come up with your way of measuring AI orientation?
Well, the AI orientation, if I remember correctly, is first called as kind of something like AI adoption or something. So we directly measure the number of keywords in the financial statements, and then we will just encounter a strong pushback from the review team. It's not really something adoption. It's more like the advertisements. You mention it in the financial statement, in the annual report, and then we are trying to find a new term for it. And I think orientation is more for me because it's kind of like the strategic thing. In strategy, we always have a thing called strategic orientation. We have innovation orientation, marketing orientation, entrepreneurial orientation. There's so many orientations. And also, I talked with Mengxiang and Jason. We have a lot of IS experts. They actually told me they have IT orientations in your field. So it's kind of like, then I realized it's maybe the direction to go, because orientation is kind of say the future direction for the firm, right? It's instead of the current adoption. But actually, when we first use that, can have a small discussion, but finally we are happy we capture that by doing all the surveys. Because in the strategy literature, when we measure orientation, we have so many survey questions and scales. And usually entrepreneurial or marketing orientation, if you are familiar with those topics, they're classified into so many detailed categories. So when we first designed this construct, that's kind of like the risk we are facing, because we don't know whether the review will push us for more detailed clarification about AI. Currently, firms don't have so many AI are used in their company. If they push for that, it's kind of like there's no way to go. So we just decided to take risks. But as you can see, we have like so many categories of keywords. We showed very clearly about each category to them, what kind of keywords to use, and then just to dichotomize the variable. So we just.
And what I like about that is that it fits our special issue introduction real well. We have this frontier. It's not a technology. It's a set of technologies, this frontier of technology. So you had a number of different keywords, you know, the vision, the natural language processing, intelligence and robotics, and some of these ideas. So that was cool. It really fits with our view of this moving but then the other thing that I really liked with the operationalization is then you controlled for IT orientation.
Yeah,
as you
absolutely.
mentioned, IT orientation already existed. So we distinguish, it's not the same thing. Having an AI is not the same thing as having an IT, which you operationalize through ERP and some other.
That was very cool. To me, that was the turning point in this paper. So number one, that you found a better conceptual domain for what you were measuring. Yeah, in the sense, what you just said, Sissy, that's not about adoption. It's more portraying an orientation, an overall vision and sort of direction that someone is going. But I think really then the key turning point was that you also were able to measure IT orientation and then statistically demonstrate that it's not the same thing, that it behaves quite differently. So one thing I wanted to press you on, so if you're a young student and you read about construct development literature, you would say, all right, read all the literature, establish the conceptual domain of a construct first. Yeah, so it would say, okay, orientation, go and read all the strategy literature. Then have a look at IT orientation, have a look at that operationalization, say, the 10, 20 questions that we have for that. And then from there, you may adapt a different type of AI orientation measure if you want. So it's sort of deductive, top-down. And what you did, I found interesting because you went the other way around. You had the data, you had some means of extracting certain information from the data, from your keyword search and all these things. So you had the indexed first, and then you sort of build it up to a new construct, which is kind of opposite what we normally do when we develop a new construct in quantitative research. Is it fair to say that you did it this way?
We need to add a little bit because we also do top-down thing. After that, we actually did the survey, and then our interviewees, they just provide us more keywords. So because they are experts in AI, it's kind of like engineers, CIOs, or the professors in the IS or in AI. So they specifically correct us for the keywords, and we redo the data collection again to go through the top-down. So it's kind of like a combine, both the bottom-up and the top-down.
Yeah, so that's cool. And there's so many interesting things. We don't want to, people can read the paper, but I think you're going to be cited for a number of things, and probably the most is going to be the AI orientation. I think people will use the word AI orientation and then cite your paper. So you're going to be well cited, I think. And the other thing that I think is cool, and I know I mentioned this and we didn't get too much into it, but adding Jason, I think, was a cool move, because here you have people, Sissy, you're more of a management scholar, not really an IS person. Mengxiang, you're not that senior yet, right? Your career is you're pretty prolific. You write a lot of papers, right? But you're not you haven't been around for decades yet at this point. And I think it's wonderful to, when you need help, reach out. And I wonder, a lot of early career folks listen to this podcast. And I think that's something that maybe they sometimes think they can do it alone, and it helps to bring on a senior person, right? Recker, do you think that's a good, strategy?
You know why? Because I think that strategy of bringing someone on board to help you, for example, with the writing part, to get someone experiencing with a backlog of 100 papers, someone that really knows how to write and maybe even how to respond to reviewers. I think that's a strategy that a lot of people frown upon. Like, how dare you do that? You can't do that. Well, why not? There's no rule. There's no rule somewhere that says you cannot bring other people. You can't change the author team. But I think a lot of people think that the author team, once set up, can never change, right? So I thought it was a good move, and I think it's also a good lesson to think about for others. They said, okay, every now and then you hit a roadblock, and there are people out there in the wider network that are really, really good at removing some of these roadblocks. So I have done that myself. Like, I've brought on other people, and I've also stepped on on the project of other people as well, helping them not in round 1, but in round 2 or 3 or 4. So I think that's completely fair, and it can be a very effective strategy, as you guys demonstrate. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, guys, so Sissy, you said you did your PhD at Texas A&M,
Yeah.
right? Mengxiang, where'd you do your PhD?
I got my PhD from the CTU of Hong Kong.
Oh, so you've been in Hong Kong. Now, your last name, I guess, and I know this is different overseas, is Lee. There's no relationship here, is there?
No.
You're not cousins or anything? All right. So how did you decide to collaborate with each other? You're from different universities, PhDs in different places.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you end up? How did you decide to start a project together?
Well, this project actually is kind of from the discussions with some of the senior scholars during the workshop. So I attended the workshop, and they found that's the topic, and after that I said that, well, this is kind of the good kind of the directions for me, especially for myself, especially if you look at my previous backgrounds, I'm focused on the individual level studies. But after joining the Hong Kong BU, I gradually believe that it's the time for me to incorporate the more a diverse research direction, including the organization level studies. So I intentionally attend some of the workshop, discuss with peoples, and trying to find some of the opportunities to work with other peoples. So I think this collaboration is kind of a good marriage between me and CC and other co-authors together to push the papers. So in my opinion, I believe this kind of the long-term conversations between us.
So I have 2 questions about this. Number one, Mengxiang, you mentioned a senior scholar workshop. Do you remember specific what sort of workshop it was? Was it the AIS senior scholars? Was it something you do in Hong Kong?
No, it's kind of it's the kind of the private workshop. It's maybe I did not use the correct names for that, but it's kind of some people presenting their papers to the audience and seek for the feedback and comments.
Okay. Yeah, that's always a very useful vehicle. Now, the other question that I had is, when I looked up both your profiles, well, it struck me that, well, neither of you has a big publication record on AI. So it seems that this is a new topic for both of you. So, and when we talked to some of the other authors of some of the other papers, one team mentioned that they saw the call for papers and then they decided to do a study. Now, I'm guessing that wasn't the case for you, right? So, when did you have the idea? Were you doing this research on AI orientation with this data set beforehand, and then the special issue call for paper came along, or was it the other way around?
Actually, we collect the data first because I'm doing something on networks. There's a very natural outcome. It's just like innovation. But it's all kinds of innovation, including AI, including digital platforms, including those are newer version like apps or those innovation. And we also have business level innovation. I guess this one is just like a variable in a very big scale of data collection, together with all the original one like the patents or the others. So yeah, I think it's kind of like the part of it. But we did saw the call for paper from MSQ, and we feel like it's kind of like a feat.
That's cool. So what's research like in Hong Kong? And I guess, Sissy, you have experience with the US, but what I know, it's very vibrant. You have a whole bunch of universities over there doing tremendous research. And I think in the last decade in particular, Hong Kong is kind of, or maybe 2 decades really, Hong Kong has kind of gone to being a kind of a central place for research and management and IS. What's it like out there? Are these seminars always happening, or do people from different universities collaborate with each other regularly? What's the ecosystem like there at the moment?
I think I will like Mengxiang ask this. He was a PhD here and then was a faculty member. He knows much more about Hong Kong than I did.
Yes, for the Hong Kong's information system disciplines, the different universities will conduct various kind of the activities. I think every month, for example, when I was the PhD student in CTU, so we had the research seminar every week. So at the times we will invite the scholars from the different university, not only in Hong Kong, but also overseas to talk about their papers, like the research in progress or working papers. And then we will find good chances for the collaboration or to learn from the senior scholar to other scholars. And nowadays, I think that each university will hold their workshop or activities regularly. For example, CTU, as far as I know, they still have the weekly research seminar. And in Hong Kong BU, we have because we have the small size of the IS group, so we have our IS seminars each month. And for the PolyU, they also have the workshop and seminars, and Hong Kong UST and Hong Kong U, they also have the seminars.
And now you're doing it via Zoom, I imagine, but in the past, you would actually go to all these workshops in person all the time?
Not really. Sometimes the schedule clash, so I not attend the workshop in person. But for most of times, I was trying to attend the CTU workshop because the Hong Kong BU and the CTU, they're close. We are located in Kowloon Town, so it's walking distance. It's easy for me to attend a seminar workshop there.
In Hong Kong, how do you relate to kind of the rest of China and the Chinese, say, management or IS tradition? It seems to be like a very concentrated pocket of high activity. Is it distinct, or is it just another part of, like, what's the relationship there with the Chinese academic?
For the IS disciplines, especially we have the strong connections with the mainland China. So in mainland China, they have the branches of the AIS called the CNAIS. So many senior scholars in CNAIS associations, they have the good connection with us in each university in Hong Kong. And for the collaborations, for example, me and the other senior scholar in mainland China, we have the joint supervision programs. We jointly supervise the PhD student. And especially nowadays, there are more and more seminars, workshops, and the meetings that will be held in mainland China. They offer both the offline and Zoom ways to attend the meetings.
So it sounds like it's a more tightly knit ecosystem than what I'm used to. Certainly, I mean, if you think about it, Germany isn't a very big place either. Right? It's obviously bigger than Hong Kong, but way smaller than China for one thing. And there's several good IS schools here, but there's not collaboration to that extent. There are every now and then there are seminars that are sort of being open to other people, and a few emails get sent around on a personal basis, such as, "Hi, we got this speaker coming. Why don't you join us?" But this is more happenstance and not really institutionalized on that level. On these joint supervisions, also not on that level. And I would wager it's the same in the US, right? It's not a highly concentrated collaborative ecosystem like what you make it out to be. It sounds fascinating, really.
Yeah, Hong Kong's cool. Yeah. And there are a lot of folks from, say, Europe and the US that live out there. Whereas if you look at mainland Chinese universities, right, you don't see a lot of folks from outside of China being professors there, or at least I don't. And in Germany, there's nobody outside of Germans as professors.
No, it's a big problem. It's a very big problem.
But in Hong Kong, you have a lot of Westerners, right? And people from outside of China and Hong Kong.
Well, that reminds me one thing. It's not really about the ethical diversity. It's more like the field diversity, because I think in our university, even though the pandemic situation just turned everything online, we can have it's kind of like a school-wide workshop seminar, or you can call it brown bag seminar. It's kind of like the school push all the faculty in different departments to work together. It's kind of like this week we are going to have a finance paper, next week management paper, next week as paper. And then just, faculty members are talking about the possible collaboration opportunity.
Yeah.
So that's why last time when I talked something on AI, it's kind of like we call it DSE. It's kind of like as scholars there in our university, it's kind of like very excited.
Do you do these papers in English?
Yes. all in English because we have Korean faculty, Japanese faculty, it's kind of US faculty, Indian faculty. We cannot do it in another language.
Yeah, same here. So we have the research Espresso and the research mixer. So the university-wide levels, they encourage the collaborations across the different disciplines. So they provide the platform and opportunities to the faculty members to share their ideas.
That's really cool. In Germany, real quick, Recker, in Germany, when you do a seminar and I'm not present, do you do it in German or do you do it in English?
Actually, it can happen that it happens in German, right? So, for example, what sometimes happens is that usually everything is announced in English and the papers in English, but then the room is only full of Germans. And then you usually get someone asking, well, can't we do this in German? And then most people would say, well, yeah, I'd rather do it in German. I usually respond with no, because I have never written or spoken about my research in German. So I would find it very weird. But most people would say, hey, it's a bunch of German folks, let's talk German. Germany is a weird place in that sense. It's very it has a very strong community, even though it's a tiny place by global standards, and it's not really a global language either. But those that speak to, and I think one of the problems is that everything, because it's been such a big market always, everything gets dubbed. Right, so all the big movies get synchronized, and all the TV shows get translated, and all the books get translated, etc. So it's very different from other parts of Europe. So Scandinavia, which is a tiny place, but they speak I think they always speak much better English because they get exposed to English literature, English music, English, movies and TV shows and all that sort of stuff. Because the market isn't big enough for dubbing to sort of be effective. Where in Germany it is. So anyway. So it's I don't know whether that's true. Look, can I ask you one more thing, guys? So I've asked the other authors this as well. We had this vision of also innovating the review process in the special issue. So not only having a special issue on managing AI, but also trying to show that you can organize the review process better. And with better, we mean primarily quicker. So we had fast rounds. So we pushed our AEs, we pushed our reviews, and we pushed the authors. You didn't have a lot of time for your revisions. And in fact, I think you had 5 rounds in a little bit over a year. Yeah. And it so happened that all of this happened during the pandemic, which we didn't foresee, of course, but that, that's how it was. So, and at times we felt really uncomfortable with pushing everyone so hard. And I wanted to ask, how was this process for you guys as an author team with these quick turnaround times? And sort of having lots of smaller, I guess, rounds in a short condensed time frame while there was a global pandemic going on.
Well, I think the time pressure is the same, but we know the time in advance because the editorial team actually gave us a deadline. What we did, Mengxiang must remember that he is the one who drafted it. We have the Excel, and then for each author, it's just like say by which date you must finish which part. And if we have our other co-authors, we can't separate it. I'm mainly responsible for the theory section, and then our co-workers, he will doing together with all the research assistants together to collect the data and run the model. And then we meet again, and then I just check everything, and we talk through the whole team, let everyone check, and then made it. So it's kind of like the parallel line. Each one is doing that work by the specific date.
Yeah, Jason actually mentioned to me that he was really impressed with your effectiveness. He works with a lot of teams that don't, but your team was like so well oiled and actually met deadlines and did what they were supposed to, right? I'm sorry, Mengxiang, what were you going to say?
No, I mean, it was like the project management, it's more like using the Gantt charts to, push everybody's forward.
Did you actually have Gantt charts?
We do.
Yes, the kind of Gantt chart like.
All right, so
that's amazing.
Recker, that other team did sprints and agile. This one's using Gantt charts and project management. This is funny. I've never done any of these things.
I'm telling you, guys, there's the thing here: project management for IS publication. So another author team, they told us they use Scrum principles very, very neatly, right? So not just a little bit like Scrum, but they really implemented Scrum to work with the sort of deadline pressure. And you're telling us you did some very classical project management work with deadlines, and you break it down to smaller tasks and you separate it. And both of these strategies seem to work. It's fantastic. I think what I'm taking away is that some discipline by whatever mechanism is really required to make this work. You know, you have large author teams, you have condensed time frame, that's lots of work to be done. You know, when you handle a 10, 12, 14 page review package, and it's not so much the tool as usual, but it's important that one form of project management is being applied, whether it's sort of deterministic or more agile, doesn't really matter.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, if you look at our special issue, we accepted all papers and completed our editorial in about a year and a half from original submission. And it's going to be in print in MISQ in under 2 years, right? Yeah. That's how it should always be. You know, I like this idea of more accelerated time cycles. Do you think because we had this accelerated time cycle, if we would have given you more time, do you think you would have done a better job?
Or a different job?
Or a different job?
And I say no.
No. Good. Right answer.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe like Mengxiang add something later. But for me, at least my part, it's kind of like already, even under the time pressure, we really tried our best, especially for all the reviewer and the editors' comments on the distinguished part. We did like the interview for all the CIOs. I asked them, and then all the others. Currently, if you let me think again, I don't know which direction to go. Maybe we need more like helpers or like more comments, so I know whether there is a way to push it forward. But right now, no. At least my answer is no.
See, I think what's really fascinating, I agree with Nick that your paper will receive a fair share of citations. You know, as far as I know, it's the first real big strategy, governance type of paper around AI. And I'm sure that topic is of interest to that very, very large community. So, you know, what I mean is your paper will attract citation just for the title and the abstract alone. I'm sure of that. What I love about the paper is that there's a lot of little nuggets everywhere in the text. There's a very nifty analysis of IT orientation versus AI orientation. There's a very innovative way of you measuring AI orientation. There's some really nice stuff in the background when you develop that construct and the you know, the theorizing around it. There's obviously very thorough empirical analysis in the end. So I think then when some people that really dig through that paper, I think they're going to have a lot to love.
And it also sets up the next paper, very nice, or the next set of papers for anybody looking to do some research, right? You operationalize, you know, AI orientation the way they did, and then you look at its effects, its lagged effects, right? So we realize your AI orientation in the near term is not going to have, you know, immediate effects that year, but, you know, a couple of years later, it should, around things like new product development, innovation success, maybe, you know, just some straight performance outcomes, right? Anyway, yeah. So that's the next paper. Are you going to do this next paper, Mengxiang and Sissy? Is this happening? Are you going to do a follow-on where you look at the consequences of AI orientation?
Wow, this is a good suggestion. Maybe so we can think about it.
All right.
So
you really haven't thought of that yet? To me, it's like the obvious next step from this paper.
We actually discussed about it, but the problem in reality is you want to see the consequences, so you need to wait for several years.
There's a lag,
yeah.
People really use the AI orientation or actually use AI. So it's kind of like on our book, and someday we will work together again to get the consequences.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, if you guys don't do it, I'm pretty sure someone else will pick up the ball and you know, continue with your research. So again, from our side, congratulations. This has been a fantastic paper. Very happy to be able to publish it. Thanks for being on the show as well, for taking the time here. And yeah, good luck with everything that follows.
Thank you, Jen and Nick, for the opportunities.